Let's get moving on the slides and let's have an open discussion today around the JavaScript special interest group topics. And the main topic actually for JavaScript special interest group is not necessarily always the JavaScript, the PnP JavaScript Core Component. It's actually the SharePoint Framework now that it's out. So we can slightly adjust our agenda from this week forward because we want to actually use this weekly call to get your input on certain topics which we might have from engineering side, so we can actually bypass those to the actual engineers or have an open discussion on what's actually needed. Some of you were actually in the office hours yesterday. The PnP office hours, the bi-weekly office hours, we kind of slightly touched some of the same topics yesterday, but let's have an open discussion today as well. And let's have an open discussion also on your feelings around, let's say, slightly readjusting the special interest group weekly coverage and what we want to actually go through. But anyway, so welcome. This is the JavaScript Special Interest Group weekly meeting. And obviously, this JavaScript Special Interest Group, it actually has two different main topics. And this was actually already planned back in last February when we started the Special Interest Group. But we were unable to talk about the SharePoint Framework at the time. So let's make sure that we all understand what the JavaScript Special Interest Group is all about. The number one objective for this weekly call and our Special Interest Group is actually to make sure that we have a forum to talk about the SharePoint Framework and the patterns and practices and how to do development on top of the SharePoint Framework. And we can show stuff, we can demo stuff, we can have an open discussion. If there's any open questions from engineering, we can ask those as part of this weekly calls from the participants on this call. And then obviously a big part has been and will be absolutely in the future as well is the JavaScript Core Component. But let's face it, we actually created the JavaScript Core Component back in the last February as a, how would I put it? It was a hidden and undisclosed plan to start teaching people how to do web stack development on top of SharePoint before we were unable to explain why. And the reason obviously was the SharePoint Framework. So now that the SharePoint Framework is out since or in the developer preview since last Wednesday, we can slightly adjust the weekly call and the balance what we want to go through. Yes, it's a hidden agenda. Thank you, Bill, for the right wording. I use Finglish and Finglish sayings in my speaking, so missing every now and then the right terminology. Thank you for that. Cool. Anyway, one additional changes on the slides. So, by the way, that's not an official SharePoint Framework logo, which I added on the slide. I just had fun within a PowerPoint for 5 minutes, and it looked cool to have S and FX on the slide. We do not have an official logo for SharePoint Framework, but why not actually use that for now? Until somebody actually comes up with a official one, if there will be an official one. But surely there has to be a logo what we're using. The other thing what I changed on the slide already was the HTTP link for the Yammer group. So the Office 365 Developer Network, where we used to have the JavaScript Special Interest Group Yammer discussions, is going to be actually closed and shut down on 1st of September. And that's pretty soon. That's within 7 days or 6 days, well, anyway, next week. And that means that we need to start gradually moving our discussion away from the Yammer. Because whenever they flip the switch, the Yammer network, the whole network, will not be no longer available. And that will redirect all of the requests to the network.office.com. The easiest way to get to the right location in the network.office.com is to remember http://SharePoint PnP community. You land on a SharePoint development group because we don't really want to differentiate, are you doing JavaScript development or are you doing .NET development or add-in development? It's SharePoint development in general. And especially in the future when the SharePoint framework is growing, we're going to introduce additional capabilities, additional things on the SharePoint framework. More and more customizations will be implemented also in on-premises on top of the SharePoint framework. So obviously it's a gradual story. We'll get there step by step also to on-premises and SharePoint on top of SharePoint 2016 somewhere around next year. But it's good that we have a one location for the discussion for now. If that one group is not enough, if that's going to be too busy and we can't control the incoming discussions, then we can split it to multiple groups. But for now, we can actually target the SharePoint developer group in the network.office.com. Was there a comment from somebody, or was that a phone which dropped to the table? That was probably a phone dropping to a table. Good. So let's actually move forward on topic. So what I wanted to do, and this is going to be then the structure from this week forward. So in the past, we kind of concentrated mainly on the PnP JavaScript Core Component. And every now and then we're getting feedback that that's actually pretty confusing, because what's actually the let's say the difference, or what's the reference, or how does the PnP Core Component, JavaScript Core Component, reflect on the SharePoint framework? So to get some clarity on that and make sure that we understand the topics, what are we actually talking, let's split this weekly call to two explicit sections. Number one section, SharePoint framework, where we're going to go through the latest updates or what's actually happening, or if we are asking something from you guys, what we're going to do today as an example. And then the second section is then the PnP JavaScript Core Component. So we clearly kind of differentiate that, okay, this is the SharePoint framework stack, this is the PnP JavaScript Core Component. The PnP JavaScript Core Component, by the way, brilliant stuff, awesome implementation, and it's a great way of showing what we can do together with the community. And you can use that with the SharePoint framework as well. But still the SharePoint framework is the I would say the slightly more interesting topic now that it's in developer preview. If somebody disagrees on that, you're more than willing to even unmute yourself, because we want to keep these weekly calls relatively open from a discussion perspective, or use time window. We will most likely have a demo today, if I remember correctly. I just need to go and double check the demo details. So what we want to do within this weekly calls is to cover SharePoint framework, then cover the JavaScript Core Component from PnP, which has its own NPM package, and then spend time on actually demoing also SharePoint framework customizations. So if you have implemented something on top of the developer preview, want to show some stuff, or you want to show some practices, this is a great opportunity for those things to be shown for other people in the community, and also get some feedback and also get some exposure. Because all of the videos and all of the weekly calls, these will go to the YouTube. So what we start from this, again, from this week forward, is that all of these weekly calls are getting recorded like in the past, but in the past they were shared in a Yammer, and people were unable to find those videos and presentations which were used. So in the future, we're going to share them using the PnP YouTube channel, which is already up and running, where we have actually last two JavaScript special interest group meetings already available as well. So if you're interested in doing a demo on something, you'll get let's get that recorded in this calls, and let's talk about the demo, let's talk about the practices, let's talk about the good things, bad things about the SharePoint framework openly. I'm a Scandinavian person, so I'm really looking into open discussion. If there's something is not working, just tell us. If something is working well, that's positive feedback as well. So understanding what's wrong is really the key to fix that. And then let's talk about the opportunities for contribution and open discussion in the end as well. I have to quickly note on Nigel's comment around the logo for SharePoint FX. We'll see if the marketing will come up with a logo for FX. Most likely they don't like the fact that I already showed my personal design for that. But that's fine. It doesn't really matter that much. Do we have actually Mauricio in the call? I just want to double check that he was able to get in. No, he wasn't. So give me 1 second. I'm going to invite Mauricio. Wants to show development stuff on top of the node, and that was a good discussion in the Yammer. So I'm going to actually invite him directly within the call because he's not. Oh, you are there. Yes, you are. You are in the call. Sorry, I didn't see you there. Cool. Mauricio is in the call. Good. You should have actually told me, so I'm not actually searching you from Yammer. Good. So let's go through the SharePoint Framework topic. Let's go through the PnP JavaScript Core Component topic. To be fair, Patrick is on vacation. It's really Patrick's and the community's baby. I personally haven't been able to be super closely involved on that one. So there's few slides to talk about on that one, but we'll continue more on that one in following weeks. So today we're going to talk about more on SharePoint Framework, and then let's do a demo with Mauricio, and let's see how long that's going to take. So it might be a 1 hour, it might be less. If I talk more, it will be 1 hour. If I talk less, it will be less than that, like typical. So moving on things. SharePoint Framework, the developer preview. So a lot of you and all of you should know that it's in developer preview. I just had a discussion with few internal people who were unaware that it's in developer preview, which is slightly mind-blowing even. If you're in a SharePoint development, please do follow up on social media so you're able to follow up on what's happening. The dev.office.com/blogs is an awesome way of trying to figure out what's happening within the SharePoint as well. But developer preview was exposed or released last Wednesday, publicly available. And we released a set of tutorials, which we've been kind of polishing and fixing after that. So there has been still updates, small updates, and typo fixing even today in those tutorials. And we're going to continue exposing additional tutorials in the new location. So right now, we have the SharePoint Framework tutorials in the SharePoint GitHub organization inside of a wiki, which is fine. You can access that information. It works. It's an HTML page essentially. You're able to follow up on the things, but that's not really that optimal situation. So what we're going to do relatively soon is that we're going to relocate our documentation inside of the dev.office.com, and it will be dev.office.com/SharePoint, which will be the landing page, because we want to tie in everything inside of the Office development, which is a marketing ask, even though SharePoint people would obviously, all of the SharePoint people are saying that SharePoint is not about Office, SharePoint is individual. But anyway, it's better to have a one portal where we have everything inside of the Office, including the SharePoint exposed. And there will be then a documentation section in the SharePoint site. And those documents are actually then coming from a GitHub. So what it means is that if you find a bug, if you find an issue within the documentation, you can actually submit a pull request, and you will then become a contributor within that article. So it's a relatively similar setup as what the Azure, Microsoft Azure has, or what the PnP MSDN pages has now. So that's going to help on fixing small things here and there, and you're able to suggest changes on existing stuff, or even submit new tutorials, which is a great way of contributing on the SharePoint framework as well. We're looking into opening up the sample repository. So as part of the SharePoint framework release, we're not going to actually have random samples on SharePoint framework and then PnP samples. That's not the right way to do stuff, and it was highly confusing within the adding time frame, or already, or even right now, it's partly highly confusing. Why do we have separately PnP and then separate guidance and the PnP samples and the other samples? So what we want to do in a SharePoint is to make sure that we have one set of samples, which are actually the patterns and practices samples, even though the repo name doesn't have a PnP. So everything what will be in a repo, there will be a few repos. I'm going to actually show you that today in the call, because it doesn't really matter if you're going to see what's coming. But we don't have an explicit PnP samples repo, and we will not use the existing repos for the new stuff. And that's one of the decisions related on the fact that there will be the SharePoint or there is already SharePoint organization in the GitHub. So we kind of keep all of the existing stuff. If you're into the PnP area already, the existing PnP repo is going to remain in the Office Dev. The PnP .NET Core is going to remain there. The PnP PowerShell is going to remain there. But then the new stuff goes to the SharePoint organization. Slightly confusing, we know, but we don't want to relocate hundreds of samples from one repo to another site. Also because going through all of the samples, doing a massive amount of cleaning and all of that is a significant investment, and just frankly, we don't have a time to do that right now. So hopefully that kind of makes sense from a justification perspective. And feel free to say, no, that's stupid, but feel free to comment on things, because your input does matter. On the SharePoint Framework side, there's already multiple PnP webcasts out. So last Monday we released the webcast together with Waldek on building a simple weather web port on using the SharePoint Framework. Certainly, and it always happens, that some MVPs are criticizing, hey, again, this is random, stupid web parts what people are then sharing and implementing. But to be fair, one of the most requested capabilities in any deployment in the intranet on top of SharePoint is the weather web part. And why would it have to be complex? Why can it be simple? Why can it be a simple web port where you define the city or the location of the city, and then it shows the weather? And that's what that web part and the webcast is actually doing. Right now, that sample is in the Waldek's own GitHub repo, but we're going to relocate some of that one actually to the inside of the official SharePoint FX repos whenever we get those actually open. So we kind of built a small subset of samples, and then after that, the official repos will be opened for other people to contribute as well, which hopefully makes sense. And there's also the updated link. You can actually do AKMS Office Dev PnP videos or AKMS SharePoint PnP videos. You'll land to our new YouTube channel where we can actually release all of the latest videos. We can release videos, some of the videos still also in channel 9, because there's quite a lot of people who go to the channel 9 and still watch the videos from there. But the target is really transition to the YouTube. Small kind of a smile. One of the reasons for moving to the YouTube, it's not really a good reason. How would I explain this? We have videos which we exposed, or the webcasts are exposed in the dev.office.com blog posts. Whenever we release a webcast in PnP, we also expose them from the dev.office.com. There's a big push in Microsoft to increase our accessibility levels. So making sure that all of the images have an alt text, and making sure that the accessibility levels are in a certain level, including that we should have captioning for the videos. Now, the channel 9 doesn't actually offer captioning. You can technically do captioning, but we would have to hire somebody to transcript the videos what we're doing. But when we move to YouTube, YouTube actually does automatic captioning for the videos. Is it doing that well or not? That's debatable. It doesn't actually understand that well, even native English-speaking persons, but every now and then the captioning is correct. Every now and then the captioning is slightly off, but that's fine. We get an automatic captioning now that the videos go to the YouTube. There's some pretty interesting captioning in those existing videos as well, if you enable the captioning on those videos and have a look on a few minutes on the video. But anyway, yes, absolutely, the accessibility push is really important as well. Now, Yesterday we did have a PnP office hours. We talked about this one there as well. I know that Bill and Nigel were there. There are a few others in this call was there as well. This is slightly already massaged a list of the SharePoint Framework tutorials, what are we actually working or starting to work relatively soon. And the key question what we have from a SharePoint engineering side is that what else do you need? What would make you happy? Except obviously the current hot discussion, which is why on earth the project, well, we have so many dependencies on a SharePoint framework. We'll get that fixed. There's an ongoing discussion on that one internally already. But what kind of tutorials on top of this list you would actually need to be able to start implementing stuff on top of the client-side web part or the SharePoint framework? One of the new things which we didn't mention yesterday is, for example, the enterprise architecture story for SharePoint FX. If you're just a pure developer, you probably don't really care about that one. But quite often our customers are looking into that proper white paper, which is explaining the reasoning, advantages, where to use it, and all of that. Which is targeted for CIOs or enterprise architects, so that they actually, for those people who make a decision for investing money on the projects. So we need to tackle that, no doubt. We want to make sure that we don't do the same mistake as with SharePoint add-ins, where we didn't actually have this kind of a white paper. So we're going to work on the white paper and let it get it out relatively soon, or by Ignite, if nothing else. So web part UI elements and file content in a project, explaining what's there, what are the settings, what are the JSON objects, what are the attributes, and all of that. Angular 1x 2.0 usage with SharePoint Framework, how to work with external scripts, cases, jQuery, and obviously PnP JS Core. We want to do a case study on a tutorial on that one as well. Pre-configured entries in web part. So essentially think about .web part files. You can have a implementation of a web part, but then you have a slightly different configurations of the same implementation, and that's right. We're not right now working, but it's coming in the framework relatively soon. Multiple web parts in one project actually can make work. Waldek actually did a blog post on that one today, how to make that work today. There are certain things in the Yo templates which don't work really well at the moment. Production builds, what does it mean? Custom property pane implementation, custom task and build process. That's probably really useful for ALM perspective and continuous integration perspective. Connected web parts, Azure app permissions. So how do we do implicit flow? Essentially, how do I call a web API in Azure which is secured from my SharePoint framework client-side web part? Migrating existing JavaScript code to SPFX, localization of web parts and CDN options and usage. There's some exciting news coming up on the CDN side at some point as well. We're looking into multiple different options to make the CDN story slightly more consumable from a developer perspective. But anything on top of your head, kind of, oh, I always want to have that tutorial and it's missing from a list. Or if you would have all of these written as articles, you would be completely unblocked. Is that the situation? Is my audio working?
Okay, I'm leaving a pause because it always seems to be me that's unmutes.
That's fine, that's fine. People can unmute or then do an IM, either way. Both are fine. But we love to hear you well, so.
Yeah, so I had a bit more of a think about this since yesterday, and I think it's quite important that somewhere in there's a sample that is just plain JavaScript, no frameworks, perhaps not even jQuery, perhaps not even TypeScript. You know, that you give something for, you know, I switch on everything. You know, I've got everything. I've got React and I've got Office UI Fabric and everything, but there are people coming into this who might not want to see somebody else's opinion about which framework to use, and they just want to see a plain JavaScript version of these web parts. So that might be an idea to give a very, very simple vanilla JS to use the
And that's
example.
actually on the sample section. So sorry for dividing this into two different sections. On the sample side, the number one thing, and that really comes down from the learnings of adding model and the PnP, we need to have stepping stones. We need to have simple CRUD operations demonstrated using vanilla JS. And that's the second bullet point on the list. But then exact same implementation using React, exact same implementation using Angular, and why not Knockout? So you can actually compare then the differences. But having that simplistic CRUD example using vanilla JS, no doubt, one of the number one requests for people to have.
It's also a good way of showing that, okay, here's an example using vanilla JS, and we're using a XHR request to get to the REST endpoint, and then here it is using PnP JS Core, and guess what? It's just a single fluent line of
that's actually
code,
a good point. I'm going to update that slide.
A good way of selling the
yes.
selling's too strong a word, but demonstrating the
power.
The reason for
yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm going to actually add that one in my separate copy of the presentation. Because that's actually a really good point. PnP JS Core, React Angular. Let's add the Knockout there as well. Why not? And then the other topics what we really want to kind of show, the trending documents in a site is more around let's use the Office UI Fabric, let's use the Office Graph and search without using actually Microsoft Graph. And that's really around the fact that the authentication model with Microsoft Graph and Office Graph is slightly different. Office Graph we can access natively with the identity which is executing the web part or the JavaScript. The Microsoft Graph would require us to authenticate against the Azure ID. And that's going to get easier in the future. Right now, it's still slightly complex.
Yeah, I guess you don't want to have too many examples where things are ever going to change, because at some point you have to cycle back around and update them.
True. But this time around, what we really wanted to do, rather than concentrating on the quantity, we want to concentrate on the quality. So having kind of a simplistic scenarios covered, and then kind of agree that, hey, that's done. If somebody is submitting a simple example which is doing CRUD operations with the fancy UI, the fancy UI isn't actually adding additional value. So we kind of rather have less samples, but polish the existing ones and keep them up to date, so that whenever the framework goes forward, the samples are always matching on the latest version. Which isn't the case with the existing PnP, which is a pity, but that's a resourcing challenge as well. We have almost way too much stuff in the repos now.
That is a danger.
Yes. There is few examples from you, Bill, as well, so I'll ping you on the update. No, never mind. Yes. But yeah, so we're trying to kind of rather have a less stuff rather than having concentrating on the number of stuff, and really concentrating first on the stepping stones example, and then on the right side we have kind of a slightly more complex stuff. So elevation of privileges, well, that's pretty much the same as using Graph, Microsoft Graph, because you need to authenticate it against the Azure ID. But the elevation requires that you're calling a web API, and then the web API is actually responsible of your operation using then app-only tokens. So slightly more complex scenario, because you can't elevate using JavaScript. That just doesn't work like that. Testing web parts using development, yeah, that's fine. But then kind of a two slightly more polished, how would I put it? I wouldn't call these hero samples, but they are more polished, ready to use almost as such in production. It's a simple CRM solution and a simple HR portal. An HR portal meaning super simple client-side web part, but which is exposing HR kind of topics. So it's not really a portal in the sense of publishing portal. All of the new age portal stuff will come slightly later, but it demonstrates the power of the client-side web part.
Yeah, and also a very popular, a big business ask in larger organizations.
True. And the CRM solution, by the way, sorry, Bill, on that one, the CRM solution is a good example of one of those things as well. So, and that the idea of that one is that we have opportunities tracked and actions and the contacts tracked for individual opportunities using SharePoint lists in a SharePoint site, but then it's exposed using the client-side web port. So it's almost like the one of the Fabulous 40 sites or Fabulous 40 templates, which we used to have, what was it, 2007, but now built using the modern experience.
Yeah, I was going to say about, I think testing web parts is testing is a very good application for some sample code, and perhaps more so than having it built into the Yeoman generator, which is kind of what we have at the moment.
True.
I think that would be a better place to put it. And you could also have multiple examples using different popular frameworks, testing frameworks.
True. But we are actually even targeting of getting a lot of this stuff ready by Ignite. So obviously things do not happen by snap of a fingers. We need to get the tutorials ongoing. We need to get the samples ongoing. And Ignite is on end of September. I think it starts on 26th or something like that in the September. So by Ignite, we would have this basic set of samples available. And then in Ignite or after that, there will be anyway, the SharePoint framework will be exposed more and more to be available for a wider audience, not just for the developer preview.
Well, I think people are expecting, I won't be there, but people will be expecting something to be announced at Ignite.
No doubt.
You have to do something, yeah.
Yes, no doubt. Well, it won't be explicitly me, but it will be somebody from my management chain announcing these things.
Sure.
So Adam or Jeff Teeper or somebody else, but anyway. So and before the Ignite, this is kind of a sidetrack because I didn't have a slide on that. We will keep on pushing updates on the existing developer preview as well. So right now there's an ongoing discussion when and how often and all of that, but it seems to be that we're going to do at least once in 2 weeks a small update where we're going to fix some of the existing issues, make the maybe Yeoman templates work better, or whatever the improvements are. Which is always a risk for then causing an issue as well, but that's another discussion.
Well, that's the nature of any kind of agile delivery.
That's true. That's true.
But you're going to minimize that risk because of all the testing, right?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. But yeah, so we'll see how that's, and I can't actually disclose exact details on that, but we will have additional builds on the developer preview before the Ignite as well, which is good. One thing what I wanted to quickly kind of walk through is your input, so people in this call around the repository structure. And what I mean with this one is that let me actually go through this in the browser. And feel free to go unmuted or talk about or give your input on the in Iron window. But this is an interesting discussion because there's so many options. How do we want to do this? So I'm going to switch to my screen. Sharing one of my screens. Hopefully I don't have anything, no, nothing that too much, because somebody can actually just note me when the screen sharing is working.
We're good.
Good, thanks Bill. So if you think about the existing PnP, the classic PnP, the main PnP repo, and by the way, one of the reasons why we don't want to move this anywhere is the number of forks, which are mind-blowing. But in here, what we started to doing, we explicitly did a completely different story than a lot of the other repos in the Office dev. And what I mean with that one is that if we go to search for repos, as an example, this is an add-in on a task pane add-in sample for Office, and it seems to be, well, it doesn't matter what it is, but it's a one sample. And personally, I really want to hear your feedback and thinking on this. We decided with the PnP to do something else, because personally, the fact that every single repo would be an individual sample then means that we have one repo which have 6 files, and from these, that, and that is meaningful. Now, if we would actually push a lot of updates to these existing samples, how can you, as a developer, keep up with all of the updates that we're pushing? If you would have to trace back on 30 different repos and make sure that you're always up to date on those. So that was really the original thinking why in the original PnP, we started doing the fact that we have one repo, multiple samples. We went then slightly overboard because there's a lot of samples, but that's fine. So at least people can find what's useful for them. The Windows Unified universal samples did actually exactly the same. So this is the Universal Windows Platform App Samples. They do have a welcome page which is listing all of their individual samples, or you can go to the samples, and these are then explicitly for a particular control. Slightly different approach than what we did with the PnP, but the whole point is that they have samples for every single control, multiple samples in a one repo. Now, with the SharePoint stuff, doesn't actually really matter that you're able to see the hidden repos right now. So we're looking into some of this is live, some of these are drafts, some of these are ideas. So we haven't actually gone completely live and decided to lock down all of the design. So we have already SP Dev Docs live. And this is going to be the location for the documents, which will get replicated on the dev.office.com/SharePoint/docs. Right now, one version of the documents is in a wiki, but if you go already today to the branches, you're able to see staging, and you're able to see the work what we're doing together with technical writers on getting that wiki MD files transformed in normal MD files, and that immediately when that's done, people can start contributing on these files. Not yet, so you need to be patient. Whenever we get the dev.office.com up to date, then you're able to do pull requests on these files. Now, the thing what we were thinking is that first of all, we kind of share our samples in the PnP site between 2 different topics, and this might be confusing, but we actually thought about this one quite a lot, and we want to make sure that people can easily find FX stuff. So there would be an SPDef FX samples, and then there would be SPDef samples. In the SPDef samples, we might have some new SharePoint add-in examples, but webhooks are coming there and other API samples. Like whenever I can't actually talk about that topic yet. Whenever there will be additional other customization stories, those would be, which are not directly SharePoint Framework stuff, they would be in the dev samples. The FX samples is then for the SharePoint Framework stuff. Now, one of the things, if we think about the SharePoint Framework samples, there's nothing here at the moment. People have different needs. So some people are highly experienced, some people are just getting started on web stack. So what they need is different. We need to have anyway also tutorial samples, simple getting started samples shared here as well. Certainly, all of those samples will be listed in the dev.office.com in the code samples or in the PnP gallery. So you're able to actually use the dev.office.com as an alternative option to find them. But any kind of an input or your feelings that would it be just sufficient to have a samples folder like what the Windows Universal people are having, and then set of samples named accordingly, and then having an intro pages in the dev.office.com and the proper README in here. Would that be something which would work, regardless on the fact that some of the samples are simple, some of the samples are slightly more complex? And that's always objective. Bill, I need you. Somebody unmute yourself.
I think I think that works fine, because usually people they want to pull down all the samples, don't they, in one big block? I mean,
Yes,
that's how
exactly.
we used to do it. So
That's
I think
how
it
I
makes
prefer.
sense.
That was my Mike, right?
Yeah.
You agree on that?
Yeah, I prefer to pull the samples. Yeah, I prefer to pull the samples down all at once, and I think from a management perspective, it works better if it's in a mono repo.
Yeah. Yes.
And anybody who's going to want to make a contribution, they're the minority, so there will be a big thing to pull down if you want to fork it. But it's a minority of people who are contributing. Most people are just consuming the samples.
True. Well, it's kind of what is big and what's not big. Hopefully, I don't actually show any confidential stuff here, but that's fine. So if we go to currently the PnP repo as an example, it's pretty huge. It's 400 megs. Now, is 400 megs a lot? Yes, it's a lot if we compare that to the age of floppies. But is it a lot?
That's almost as big, almost as big as a SharePoint Framework's Hello World.
Yes. Well, okay, that's fair. That's fair feedback. So, and just a kind of a note on that one. So, as an example, simple Hello World web part. So, obviously, we'll clean this up. Is now
I think that's getting
megabytes.
That's getting better. I think people are on top of that, which is really great.
Yes. So,
And to me, it seems like they're over-engineering that one.
Yes, well, no doubt.
Try to get the size down.
Yeah.
Like they're going to start suggesting we put like data centers on the moon so we can get that data off the planet.
Come on, Microsoft, you can solve that. You can always coach your way around the problem. So.
Right?
Yep. Good. Okay, good feedback. Ramona has also it would be helpful to designate whether they are SPFX web parts or something more complex or provider hosted application. That's absolutely the idea as well. So if there are FX samples, they will be in a separate repo. If they are whatever other samples, they will be in the SPDef samples. So we kind of will differentiate slightly what's complex and what's not. Webhooks, as an example, is slightly, or actually much more complex, even though it's not super complex, but it's much more complex than typical client-side web part. That's waiting to get released at some point. Now, that's the same thing what we did a webcast already in the PnP. If you're interested, there's a webcast around the upcoming SharePoint webhooks, so nothing that's super confidential shown there. Good. I think that's enough for the repo discussion. You're just essentially confirming what we were thinking as well, which is good. So let me switch back on the slides. Good. A few things what I wanted to quickly cover on the SharePoint FX side before we go, and we're running out of time soon. But Patrick is not here, so the JS Core discussion has to go until next week anyway. So in the SharePoint FX side, the testing of the tutorials is really the key. Right now already, if you go to the SharePoint GitHub, you can run through the tutorials, you can test them out. If something isn't working or you want to give feedback, you can use the issue list, you can use other stuff as well. Have a discussion in Stack Exchange or in network.office.com. So open up that discussion there. That's going to help a lot. Test the platform and demo your stuff in PnP SIG calls. And that's what we want to do today as well with the demo around the Node.js stuff. And I'm going to make sure that we have at least 10 minutes for that. I know that that's less because I've been talking too much, but we should be fine. Which, by the way, reminded me I'm going to update Mauricio already as a presenter. Submit changes to the existing ones. Tutorials or new tutorials is coming soon. Submit FXX samples, that's coming soon as well. And absolutely, what we want to do is make sure that if you feel that something isn't right, please don't be silent in your office or have a discussion with your colleagues, or absolutely do that as well. But please share Microsoft as well. If for some reason you think Microsoft, not gonna, what would be the right word to use? So I'm not actually causing using any bad words. If for some reason you are not happy with what we're producing, let us know. Trust me, we want to listen, we want to fix it, and that's usually it actually helps. The more people are saying the same stuff, no doubt we'll listen when we're going to fix that. And I would even say that that's the new Microsoft, which I'm super proud of being part of. So we truly, truly want to make sure that you guys are happy on what we're producing. So if you're not happy, let us know. We'll see what we can do. And obviously there's always multiple opinions on every single topic. So what's right, what's wrong, that's always debatable. Now, PnP JS Core Component. And like mentioned when we started the call, I was slightly running out of time. Sorry for that, but I think the SharePoint Framework topic is really, really important right now. The JS Core will absolutely cover that in future in this weekly calls as well. But we're trying to do kind of a 50-50 on SharePoint Framework and then PnP JS Core, depending on how much topic there's to cover, and then have the demo section still to show some stuff around the SharePoint Framework or some stuff around the web stack development. But really the PnP JS Core, it technically hasn't got anything to do with SharePoint Framework, but it's a JavaScript library which can be used using the client-side web parts, and it's actually helping to increase the productivity of the developers. And I know that there has been some confusion around the messaging around that, and that's exactly why I want to make sure that we fix that confusion and the messaging inside of the PnP as well. Contribution list. So there's multiple people who already helped on building that. We do have version 1.04 coming up, if I remember correctly, quite soon. There's some issues reported in the node access to SharePoint. Patrick was able to reproduce that one. He's going to work on that when he's coming back from his vacation time. He's away this, I think, today and tomorrow, and he'll be back on the next week. So he's going to absolutely come back on that discussion in Yammer / in the Gitter. And please keep the great questions coming around that one. And yes, Nigel, on your comment, I would say the JavaScript Special Interest Group is around SharePoint FX and the PnP JavaScript Core. So the JavaScript Special Interest Group is really around the SharePoint Framework. But then the other topic is the PnP JavaScript Core Component. But like you said, we're going to split this in two. And the 1.04 on the PnP JavaScript Core Component is coming up relatively soon. So that's not a massive amount of changes. There's some upcoming blog posts from that one, from Patrick's blog. You can probably find that most easily from the Gitter, or then let me actually make sure that I'm sharing that in the IM window. So here's Patrick's blog, and Patrick is blogging quite a lot on the usage of the PnP JS Core Component. So that's going to help on understanding and also related stuff on that one. And opportunities to contribute on this one. We're going to jump that right now. Before we let's not skip the team discussion right now. I want to make sure that Mauricio has time to do the quick demo we chatted in Yammer. So we get one live demo today. I've been just talking for 84 minutes. Mauricio, are you ready? Excellent.
Here's my code. Just a simple code. I had to retweet it from Twitter and inserting in SharePoint list. It's just a simple code. Here initialize the code. Set up the config with Node. Here's my config sample. And here is my config, real config. When I initialize the list and ensure that it's there, and initialize the tweet string. Here's the simple line, the tags I'm tracking. When a new tweet comes, I get the list by title and add them I start waiting in Twitter. It's just these a few lines, but I can't hear you. Okay.
Can you hear me fine? Can you hear us?
I'll restart my node phone. You can download the link that Vesa sent. PnP JS Core, it's awesome. I'm using a SharePoint host environment and in a Node.js environment.
I think
that's it.
Yeah.
Just this few line of code.
Yeah, it's pretty actually. This really shows the power of the PnP JavaScript Core Component. And obviously, you could do exactly the same stuff using whatever JavaScript framework, whatever you actually, whatever is your chosen framework. But this really shows.
Share my screen.
This really shows the simplicity on using the PnP JavaScript Core Component and how efficiently it can be used. So there certainly is a small learning curve for that one as well, but I think that's actually highly beneficial for to be used even in the existing implementation. Okay, I think that's it for that one. I'm going to switch back on the slides just for the sake of closing the recording. We actually consumed almost the whole hour. Is there any feedback, ideas, question, what you want to actually go through still?
I just wanted to say that I did try building a SharePoint Framework web part using the PnP and Office UI Fabric and React, and actually you can, I think, it's a very trivial example I've done, but you could really do a lot with very few lines of code. Yes. Using all those technologies. I mean, I know we've been talking about we're overloading maybe the Hello World web part, but it's still, it didn't add much to add in React. I had to add the node fetch for some reason. That seemed to be missing. I'll maybe put an issue in for that. But once you got SP PnP JS, just a few minutes, do an npm install, and you've got that in there, and you've already got Office UI Fabric. React, I think, is already in there if you create a React mode using the Yeoman generator. So you've got, the Office UI Fabric React components are very nice as well. I mean, maybe not quite mature yet, but you've got all those components in there. So that's just like a one-liner of what almost looks like HTML markup.
Sure.
And then one line of PnP SP web select title get, and then
right.
And that's it. And you've got yourself something quite powerful. With you only have to create a few lines of code. And I think
sure.
It's very satisfying. I think.
Actually, on that one.
Hey, Bill, you just gave me an idea. I think maybe calling it a Hello World web part might be setting the wrong expectation because it's really like a full developer stack ready to go.
True.
Yeah, but I mean, the Hello World just means simplest sample you can think of, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Hello developer web part.
Hello SharePoint.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, we should call it a starter kit.
We should.
Yeah.
We should. Yeah, that's actually a good point. Quickly, Bill, on that one, you probably don't mind if you would demo that actually next week, next Thursday on the weekly call, because even though it might be super trivial for you. It might not be super trivial for everybody who's looking into getting into the SharePoint framework and understanding how things work. And a lot of people are not familiar with the JavaScript, the PnP JavaScript Core Component either. Would you be up for it?
Sure.
So, cool.
Everybody has different coding styles too, so even just seeing a trivial example that somebody coded a different way is valuable.
Yes, no doubt, no doubt. So let's actually do that. I'm going to follow up on, well, you're probably going to join on next Thursday as well, so I'm going to make sure that we have a spot in the agenda for that demo as well. If there's other people who want to show something around the SharePoint framework or something around what they develop using the PnP JavaScript Core Component, just let us know. Using the, I would almost say using the Yammer, but we can't use the Yammer anymore, which is painful, but using the Kiter or using the network.office.com SharePoint developer group. So, or you can always ping me as well, but I do get too many emails anyway, so I don't have time to read. But let's make sure that people have an opportunity to show their stuff, and we can talk about those things, and people can then learn about how to do development in the future as well. But I think that's it. We're hitting the 1 hour marker. So let's actually close up this one. And hopefully, based on what I'm actually hearing, people are pretty open for the idea that we do kind of a 50-50 within this weekly calls, or now concentrate more on the SharePoint framework, obviously, but we're not going to forget the PnP JavaScript Core Component. But now there's a version 1.0 is out. We're going to keep on maintaining that and improving that. But I think there's a high demand for the SharePoint framework topic. So let's actually use this time, for engineering to collect feedback from you guys, but also you guys demonstrating stuff, and we can have an open discussion on that. Cool. The recording will be in YouTube within, I would say, a few hours, and I'm going to post a Twitter tweet on that and a post in the network.office.com SharePoint group when the recording is available, if you want to have a look on that. But I think that's it so from this week, and we kind of continue with the JavaScript special interest group within 1 week. So thank you everybody for joining, and let's keep on chatting in the Kiter or in the network.office.com or whatever forum you actually want to use. So we'll be absolutely in touch. Thank you.